Just about anyone who knows anything about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints knows that it's a church that centers around family and its role in the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's very ironic that the very church that emphasizes family as the central unit of both society and eternity has actually done itself a disservice by dissuading me from having one of my own. I am going to tell you in this video how, in its zeal to encourage me to have kids and have a family, the church has actually done everything possible to dissuade me from any action appertaining thereunto, and how, in order to make them aware of the misguided, interested but albeit uninspired opinions of those that find themselves in our circles of influence. About 6 months after I got married, my wife and I started building a house. And when we moved into this house, that was completed sometime later, the bishop of our congregation, in his infinite wisdom, believed that it was inspiration that led him to call us to serve in the nursery. The nursery was teeming with about 8 to 12 toddlers each week. As far as I could tell, none of them had any discipline or schedule or boundaries whatsoever. The parents would drop them off and then go to their meetings, and we would be stuck with them. My wife wasn't really much of a teacher. I wasn't at the time either. I've become a much better one since then. And I was frustrated by the fact that other people were critical of how we handled their kids, even though they had apparently done nothing to handle them according to the principles that I believed were important. Eventually, frustrated as I was by the behavior of the parents and the behavior of the children, I went to my bishop and asked him to release us from service in the nursery. This was the beginning of the end for my wife's activity in the church, but it was the beginning for me of contraception, because serving in the nursery made me have almost no desire to have any children. It manifested itself in our marriage in the fact that, among other reasons for resisting my wife's advances, I didn't want to bring one of those snot-nosed brats into the world, and I didn't want to raise one with her, because I was afraid they would become exactly as aberrant and abhorrent as the behavior exhibited by the children of other families that I had served. I was afraid of what I would do to other men's kids, because I was frustrated, because I was angry, because I was not allowed to discipline them, and yet they had no discipline in themselves, and their parents were more interested in being their friends and entertaining them and giving them gifts than giving them love. And so it was easy for me, for the time of my marriage and for the time immediately afterwards, for me to not engage in any of the activities that lead to children. So enter a few weeks ago, when the behavior of the church again discouraged me from having any desire to build, establish, or foster a family of my own. About 4 months ago, I was called into a bishopric, because at last April conference of this year, the brethren decided that it was time that they stopped barring individuals such as myself from leadership positions and opened the door for me to be called to that position. So a divorced single male is now in the number 2 position in the congregation, right underneath the bishop. And so as one of my responsibilities, I'm supposed to meet with members in order to clear them for service in our temples. And after one such meeting with a octogenarian sister, she told me that many wonderful things, and concluded with this statement, that we need to find you a wife so that you can become the next bishop, end quote. And I said to her, no thanks. I realized that the only thing that might be keeping me from the responsibility and burden of being a bishop is the fact that I'm not married. It's already a problem, because the other 2 individuals of the bishopric are married with children. One of them has young children, and the others are mostly grown. But these individuals don't seem to understand that just because I'm single, it doesn't mean I have copious amounts of unfilled free time and money flowing out of my butt that I can throw at anything and everything they want me to do. I have interests and activities. I have all of the chores of the household, and anything that comes up that has to be done entirely by me. Now, this, of course, precludes that a wife in a marriage is actually contributing to that, but I know both of their wives do contribute, and so they have an asset in the home that I do not have, and so as a consequence, I actually have less free time than they do, children in the house notwithstanding. I do work a lot of hours. Today, for example, I will be here for 14 to 14 and a half hours. Now, that does include lunch break and breaks, but today I had to do invoices and billing for the finance department to pay on scientific suppliers. I've got a brand new student worker that I had to train in grain. I have grading to do. I have class prep to do. I have classes to teach. And of course, all the other things that have to go on during a day, both planned and unplanned, that come up during a work day, culminating with a 3-hour lab tonight from 7:30 to 10:30. I don't have time. And the last thing I want to do is add a wife to the pile so you can laden me with more burdens and say, here, because right now, when things come to me, I can say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to handle that. That's the bishop's, and give it to him. But if I become the bishop, then I can't do that. And all of the burden and all the responsibility falls on me. In other words, the buck would stop here. And I would be completely responsible, both in the eyes of the world as well as in the eyes of the Lord, for everything that transpires in the congregation. When the bishop does change, when that day comes, even if we're all released from service at the same time, no one's going to go, oh man, this bishop was the greatest. This bishopric was the greatest. The first counselor is what really made it shine. Assuming, of course, that that's the case. Because I'm not saying that's the case, because I got a lot of chips on my shoulder about what's going on. So it might come across that I'm actually antagonistic rather than a blessing. They'll talk about the bishop and how great a bishop he was. Because no one ever talks about, oh man, we had this awesome counselor or Sunday school teacher. And I used to tell my Sunday school class, nobody is going to blame me if you guys don't turn out right. No one's going to give me credit either. And no one's going to blame the counselor, and no one's going to give me credit either, because ultimately it's not up to me. Ultimately, I'm not held accountable before the Lord. So you're telling me you want me to be held accountable. Why would I do that? So the only thing between me and that right now is I'm not married. Now, that being said, there's also this. We'll pull open our scriptures for this. All right, I pulled it up so I don't mess it up. So this is from the first epistle of Timothy, chapter 3. It says, a bishop must then be blameless, husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Blah, blah, blah. One who ruleth his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Not a novice, lest by being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, a couple of things here. Husband of one wife. Even if I do remarry, that would be my second marriage, which disqualifies me as far as I understand this. Number 2, given to hospitality. You know how many people I've had visit my house that aren't blood relatives in the 10 years I've been living there? 5. Okay? That's not me. I don't have my children in subjection, and I'm not ruling my house well because it's just me. I have not proven that, which means I'm also a novice, which means it's likely that I would be lifted up into pride. That's the problem with elevation to wealth or status at a young age, is it usually swells a person with pride. I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg, one of the richest people to ever walk the planet, who thinks that his poop doesn't smell. I'm sorry, but that's pretty damn proudful. Prideful? Proud. Yeah. Proud will work. So I don't qualify to be a bishop. And I shouldn't. So the teachings of the church, the behavior of the church, the culture of the church, and the way that things are stacking up, the decisions that leaders are making are actually leading me to make decisions to go the opposite direction, to make sure that it's not possible, as presently constituted, to make me a bishop. Because why in Hoboken would I want to be? Nobody in their right mind wants that. Nobody in their right mind aspires to be a bishop, or if you're a Catholic, a cardinal or a pope, to be a general, to be president. All of these people are narcissistic egomaniacs. I don't want to be that kind of a person. Now, maybe you think I already am. I don't want to be any more, if that's true. That's not the kind of person I want to be. That's not the legacy I want to have. That's not the life I want to lead. And all I have to do is not marry. And they put me in the nursery, and I don't want to have kids. So the church has made sure to give me every reason to not want to be a family, to not want to have a family, to not want to date. And maybe they should think about that. And maybe I'm not the only one. Maybe the big rash of unmarried young men who just want to hang out are because they've recognized the same thing, that you're undermining them that you're asking them to give everything of themselves, and you're not asking anything of the women to whom they give everything. I was just thinking about women who won't take a man's last name. And I know this is kind of a touchy subject, but it's kind of a petty thing too. And it's a really good barometer, because you're going to take all my money, live in my house, benefit from whatever coattails I have, but you won't take my name? Yeah, hard pass. What the hell? And if you know anything about our marriage ceremony, that's not how our marriage ceremony works. And there's far too many women apparently in the church who either don't know or don't care what the oath and covenant of marriage actually asks of the woman. They only care what it asks of a man. And the church at large doesn't care what it asks of the women. It only seems to care what it demands of the men. All the while the women complain about the men holding the priesthood, as if it's some kind of great thing to have this. Because most people want to be bishop, want to go, hey, when I was a bishop, as if it makes them better than me somehow that they were a bishop. It means, well, yeah, you fit the qualifications and you were available. I don't, and I wasn't. Because when you were a bishop, I was 12. We're going to call a 12-year-old to be the bishop. Anyway, if you've been a bishop in the church, if you enjoyed your bishop in the church, if you've enjoyed being a bishop in the church, that's great. I am happy for you. I simply want to point out that some of the behavior and the teachings of the church might actually be dissuading men from starting families because they're afraid of the burdens that will be put on them, the responsibility and the accountability that won't be asked of the women. Because I'll tell you what, nothing that I know of has ever been asked of my ex-wife. In fact, the courts allowed her to strip money away from me. And the church hasn't asked her for a dime, hasn't asked her for a blessed thing. But I got dragged through the mud. And I still carry it around like a scarlet letter that I've been divorced. Yeah. I think you're creating the very problem that you're complaining about. And maybe you ought to think about it. And think about how it's coming across to those who hear it. Because it's sort of a backhanded compliment. Wow, if you were only married, you could be the next bishop. I don't want to be the next bishop. I don't want to be a bishop. I know that means I'm probably the best person to be it because I don't want to be. But if all I have to do to avoid that is not get married, that's an easy way to disqualify myself from something that I wish to eschew. Food for thought. Godspeed and good luck. I'm grateful you bear the mantle. And I'm going to go put on the black robes of a false priesthood and go teach my class about the ideal gas law. Good night.